The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, it's not only game day, it's a big game day. Big divisional game in Philadelphia tonight. And the winner of this would have the inside track to win the NFC East. They have been very careful in Ashburn about talking about goals and number of wins and looking past the next game. But boy, if they win this game with 7 games to go, oh, it sets up very nicely. Actually, 6 after this. And with 7 wins already in the hamper, if you add 4 more, they get 11. Last time they won 11 games, they won the Super Bowl. Did they win the Super Bowl this year? I don't think so. But this is a far cry from the 4-win season of last year and really the last quarter century when it's been just abysmal for this team. And heading to Philadelphia, it's interesting. They have played night games there, which have made a big difference. They won a Monday night game a few years ago when the Eagles were 8-0. Remember, they closed out the 2020 season with a game against Philadelphia to make the playoffs. It's kind of a hold-your-nose situation where they were 7-9, and they managed to win that game and then host a playoff game against Tom Brady and the Bucs. And Brady and the Bucs went on to win the Super Bowl. But a lot of football to be played, and I'll spend some time talking about the game and the injuries and everything setting up for tonight. But saw something this morning, and as you know, I'm at an age where I still get the Washington Post delivered, the actual newspaper. Pay a lot of money for it, but, you know, I've gotten the Post all my life. It's part of my morning routine. And when I pick up the paper early in the morning and I have my bowl of cereal, my routine is to flip through the entire paper, including the obituaries. And, you know, some years ago, and I've been doing this probably since I was in my 20s, and when I started doing it, I would see, like, grandparents of friends who passed away over the years. It was parents of friends. And sadly, in recent years, it's been friends, people I went to high school with or grew up with. And you find out that they passed away, you've lost touch, and you read their obit in the Post. But I saw this morning, and this really floored me. And it came with a picture. Jacqueline Kent Cook. She was only 36 years old. She was born about a week before Doug Williams and the Redskins won that Super Bowl against Denver. And the backstory on this is absolutely incredible. Yes, the name is spelled the same as Jack Kent Cook, Cooke, an E on the end. And if you're too young to remember this, you'll be probably surprised at this story. If you're old enough to remember, maybe you forgot the details, and I'm going to fill you in on the details now. Again, 36 years old, way too young to die. A beautiful blonde woman who had graduated from Marymount College. She had lived in Washington, and she was, in fact, the daughter of Jack Kent Cook. And at the end of the obituary, and there's no cause of death given here, but at the end of the obituary, it says at Jacqueline's request, no services will be held. She will be buried next to her father. And this story includes a lot of things that are connected to the football team here. And if you watched Winning Time, the HBO show where they documented the Lakers of the early 1980s with Magic Johnson and Kareem and all that, it was written by Jeff Pearlman, who we had on the show as he was trying to keep the series alive a couple of years ago. Anyway, Cook, during his life, was married 5 times. His first marriage lasted 45 years. He married his, I guess, high school sweetheart, 17-year-old Barbara Jean Carnegie, married 1934, divorced 1979. At the time, it was the largest divorce settlement in history at $42 million, and the judge in the case was Judge Wapner, the Judge Wapner of the People's Court. That was after he had retired from the bench when he did the People's Court, but at the time, he was still a judge in Los Angeles, and that was the largest settlement. Well, in order to pay that off, Cook had to sell the Forum, he had to sell the Lakers, and he had to sell the Kings. He still was the majority owner of the Redskins, but because the NFL had a rule that you couldn't have multiple teams in other sports, in other words, if you were an NFL owner, you had to be exclusively to the NFL. That, of course, has changed, and it's changed here now with Josh Harris owning the Sixers and the Devils. But in those days, you couldn't do it. So once he sold those teams and the Forum, he moved out of Los Angeles, took an estate in Middleburg, and took control of the Redskins again. And that's when things really blossomed with Bobby Beathard and Joe Gibbs and the greatest era in the history of Washington sports during the 1980s. Well, he was not divorced for very long because the divorce was settled in 1979. In 1980, he married Jean Maxwell Williams, a sculptor from Las Vegas. That lasted 10 months. He had to settle up for $1 million in that. And then he got married again. He waited a while. This was July 24th, 1987, when he married Suzanne Elizabeth Martin, a college dropout, 31 years old. She was 43 years younger than he was. And this marriage lasted 73 days. He agreed to marry her if she signed a prenup and aborted the fetus she was carrying. And that would have been her third abortion in 2 years. So after the wedding, she changed her mind. She told Cook that she wanted to have the baby, and they separated a month later. After they divorced, and I'm reading from Wikipedia here, after they divorced, Martin gave birth to a girl who was named Jacqueline Kent Cook. In her divorce action, where her lawyers used the child as, quote, a wedge, Martin looked for $15 million from Cook, plus $18,000 a month in alimony and child support. It went to circuit court in Fauquier County, and that was rejected. What they settled on, listen to this, was a $75,000 a year stipend, money paid to the child, a Jaguar, and the use for 5 years of an apartment at the Watergate complex. So that was the divorce settlement at the time. Well, this child, grew up, and he actually played a role in her life. I remember this, that he was seen, taking her to like Kentucky Derbies, and I believe she was with him at Redskins Park at one time or another. And sadly, he died when she was, about 9 years old. And she's, kept up the legacy of being Jack Kent Cook's daughter. And now, sadly, at the age of 36, will be buried next to her father. I'm not sure exactly where he's buried, but he's Canadian. I know that, originally from Canada. I don't know if it's there or somewhere here in the United States, but her mother survives her, Suzanne Elizabeth Cook. She kept the last name. And the marriage, of course, lasted only a couple of months there, 73 days. But the daughter they produced, very sad, dead at the age of 36, died last month, October 18th. And as it says in the obit, she went on to do a variety of things. She graduated, as I say, from Marymount College. She had a passion, they said, for exploring new cultures, went to 7 continents, 7 wonders of the world. She found her solace at the Hotel Essentia, her favorite place on earth, on the Mexican Riviera. And, man, that is really stunning. And it brings back memories of a really, turbulent era, but a very successful one for the football team. As you know, Jack Kent Cook would have another marriage. He married Marlena, and they divorced in 1993 when she made headlines by drunk driving in Georgetown with a man holding onto the hood of the Jaguar. But they remarried in 1995 and stayed together until he died 2 years later. So I thought that was, to me, that was like, whoa. And it is very sad, of course, that she lived to be only 36 years old. All right, to the football game tonight. And, well, keep your fingers crossed on this. There's a couple of things to be concerned about. One, Austin Seibert is out. He's still out with the hip injury, which means that Zane Gonzalez, who did well last week, kicked the 2 field goals in the loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he will be the kicker again tonight. They picked him up off the street. Had not kicked until last week in a game since 2021. So he'd been out of the league for 3 years. But did a credible job, so he's going to be the kicker tonight. Marshawn Lattimore still not ready to go because of that hamstring injury, which they knew about for sure when they traded for him at the trade deadline with New Orleans. He's not going to play tonight. But Brian Robinson is off the injury report. Now, there's no official word, and I just won't get official word until the inactives come out like an hour before the game, like 7 o'clock tonight. But the fact that he will be hopefully back on the field for them will be a big thing. Now, here's something to be concerned about. Zaccheaus, Olamide Zaccheaus, who has been returning punts and, didn't light it up, but didn't do anything to scare the hell out of you. But he did last week against the Steelers. He muffed 2 punts, and one of them was recovered by Pittsburgh. It would seem that they have other guys to return punts, and, this is the NFL. You can't put your team on the line like this. But Dan Quinn has elected, as he said yesterday, he's going to stick with OZ.
You have to look at the whole body of work in terms of the work ethic, what you've seen before. And so, when you're going through it, you want to make sure there's not a pattern that comes up. And if that's the case, then it's somebody else's role to do that in punt return. But there's also a lot of work and trust that's been put into that. And so that's really where I look at it. And I'm at the top of everything, like protecting the team. And so that's where I stand on it.
Given the 7-3 record, it would have to be in Quinn we trust, right? You'd have to feel that way. But we do remember, and it was a different coaching staff, so maybe this isn't fair, but Cameron Cheeseman last year, who nearly got Tress Way killed with a bad snap, and he was cut finally. They had traded up. This was, again, when you go back and look at what the drafting was during the Ron Rivera era, it was frighteningly bad. And they moved up in the 5th round, maybe the 6th round, I think it was the 6th round, to take Cameron Cheeseman, a snapper from Michigan, a long snapper. You can get long snappers. They not only used a draft pick, they traded up to get him. And he was okay for a couple of years, and then, just went bad last year. And I saw his follow-up story on him. He's now going to dental school. He's left the NFL behind. He's not going to even try it anymore. So he's gone. Zaccheaus, I guess he's got enough of a track record, played well in Philadelphia, had done a good job up until last week on the punt return. So he's going to stay in that spot, and talked about that yesterday with Scott Abraham of ABC7.
You watch the film, see what you could have done better, what I could have done better, and then you get back to work, and then you try to flush it as quick as possible. I think it's a blessing that we get to play on Thursday because, it's a quicker turnaround, so it's less time to think about it. So.
How do you avoid that being like a mental thing? Obviously, you're physically gifted. You can catch a ball, but, there's a mental aspect there.
Yeah, you just got to, like I said, you have to next play mentality, man. Like, you can't dwell on it too much. You can't think about it because it'll snowball. It'll snowball if you let it. So, just I do a lot of things outside of the field too, just like meditating, praying, and stuff like that, just to keep the mental in the moment, in the present. So, I'm good mentally. So,
what's the feedback been like from the coaching staff, the players? Obviously, Johnny had his thing. You had. Everybody just seems like backing each other up in a sense.
Yeah, that's why this is a team sport, man. We got a lot of great people in this organization, not only just on the team but in the building, that are supportive and just been showing love. So, they have the utmost trust in me, and I'll come back strong.
Okay, but I think he's got one more. If there's another muff tonight, I think you got to have somebody ready to go. I think that it's quite possible there'll be somebody else back there returning punts. Maybe Austin Eckler. Eckler's been returning kicks. He's done a good job with that. He's a veteran guy. Doesn't seem to get rattled. And, it could be something like the yips with what's going on. Because both the muffs in the Pittsburgh game were off of his face mask. And I found that to be very odd because you're always taught to catch a football with your hands. And it's almost like he's attempting to catch it against his body, and he's getting his face stuck in the ball, and the wind wasn't really blowing much on Sunday. I don't think that was a factor. And I just remember this, when Deion Sanders was here in 2000, and you could probably make the case that Deion Sanders is the greatest punt returner of all time, certainly the most flamboyant. And he had a game where he actually, in overtime, helped to win it with a big punt return against Tampa. Back in the day, he would have scored on that, but he took it far enough, so they kicked an overtime field goal, and they won the game. And he started talking about, if I get 5 returns for touchdowns, I'm buying Rolexes for everybody on the special teams, blah, blah, blah. Man, that's as close as he got. And with, 5 or 6 games to go in the season, he was also fielding them off his face mask. And that was it for Deion as a punt returner. Now, amazingly, he sat out, I think it was 3 full seasons, and came back and played well with the Baltimore Ravens. Just an amazing, amazing athlete. But at some point, the punt return, which is probably one of the most precarious plays in football, that became a little bit much for him. And hopefully that's not going to be the case with OZ. But we're going to find out tonight, an 8:15 kickoff. By the way, if you don't have Prime, it's going to be on Channel 5. Channel 5 is doing the game, and it's an 8:15 kickoff. I wanted to mention a Mark Fisher story in the Washington Post today. And it's actually a column. It's an op-ed column in the front section. And it's I don't think it's really political here because we don't have an election going on anymore. It's Donald Trump as president. But if you've followed the history of Donald Trump, not just in politics but in other things he's been involved in, he's desperately wanted to get into the NFL. And he bought the New Jersey Generals of the USFL in the 1980s, 83, 84, with the intention of forcing a merger. He wanted to get his team into the NFL, and ultimately he helped to kill the league. He tried to get Don Shula, and he embarrassed Don Shula on TV when he said, yeah, I wanted to hire Shula, but he wanted an apartment in Trump Tower, and I didn't want to give it to him. Shula immediately withdrew his name as if it was really ever under serious consideration, didn't want to work for him. But Fisher points out that he was covering Donald Trump as a reporter for the Miami Herald in 1984. And Trump said to him, these real estate deals I do are starting to get on the boring side. Remember, this is 40 years ago, so Trump is late 30s then, right? He had spent $6 million to buy the New Jersey Generals, a team in the woeful upstart United States Football League. I don't know how woeful it was. Actually, it could have worked as a spring league, and if you saw the documentary Small Potatoes, he really killed it. But I talked about him, trying to get Shula and so forth, and this is something that Trump told him in this conversation. He said, football is where the juice is. It's a cute play, a good play. And over the years, he tried to buy the Buffalo Bills. There have been times he criticized Jerry Jones for spending too much money to buy the Dallas Cowboys, which obviously was a great investment since he paid less than $200 million and now could sell them for probably $10 billion. And then Fisher writes this: Trump's in his favorite position, deal maker. Of course, he's no pal of the NFL, having lashed out at the league and quarterback Colin Kaepernick in 2017, and then the 49ers star took a knee in protest during the national anthem. But in a sign of Trump's persistent eagerness to be accepted by the league, he did an about-face 3 years later, advocating for any team to sign Kaepernick who never played in the NFL again. Here's the gist of the column. Trump is going to be moving back to D.C. His wife apparently is not. She's going to stay, I guess, in Mar-a-Lago. But Trump is going to be moving back into the White House. And he likes the attention. He likes the juice of the NFL. He likes the cuteness of it. What if he gets together with Muriel Bowser, the mayor, and somehow is able to pull off a power play here and get the Commanders located back in D.C., at the RFK site? Now, it's going up for a vote before the Senate, and the signs are that it doesn't look good because it only has to be one abstention or one senator opposed to it, and it looks like they got 2. Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, like to keep him there, and also the senator from Montana who's tied up in keeping the name of William Blackhorse Campbell prominent. He designed that logo that was on the helmet from 72 through 2019. So that may kill it for this year. I guess it could be reintroduced next year. But what if Trump gets behind this with Muriel Bowser and somehow there's a push and the team winds up back at RFK, and Trump, who loves to bask in the glory of these kind of things, gets credit for it? I mean, it's an interesting thought. It's. I'd like to see him back in D.C. The way the wind is blowing now, I would not be surprised if they rebuild on the Landover site. That would not surprise me. But if you're into the whole nostalgia thing and you'd like to see it happen again, which I think most of us would, Trump may be an ally in this. It may be something. No matter how you feel about him politically, in this particular case, he may be a big help to getting the stadium back in D.C. All right, coming up in the next hour, much more on the matchup tonight between the Commanders and the Eagles in Philadelphia. And Kurt Warner, who knows a thing or two about playing quarterback, gives his analysis of why some of the young quarterbacks like Jayden Daniels are succeeding and why maybe some of the others are having their struggles. We'll get to that more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. One of my favorite movies, Glengarry Glen Ross. First prize, Cadillac. Second prize, steak knives. Third prize, you're fired. Well, steak knives, in the case of the Commanders so far, is the grand prize in all of this, as Caleb Williams is going through his struggles, and Jayden Daniels is the rookie toast of the NFL, and he's on national display tonight in the Thursday night game at Philadelphia. It'll be an 8:15 kickoff, and only 2 primetime games for the Commanders this year, scheduled anyway so far. Look out next year. If this continues, get ready for a lot of late-night football in the 2025 season, but there's a lot of football to play this year. 7 games are left. If they win 2 of them, I think they got a good shot at the playoffs. If they win 3, I think they'll certainly be in the playoffs. And if they win 4, that'll be 11, and that might put them in contention to win the division. And who wins the division could go a long way to being settled tonight when they play at Philadelphia. They would have the upper hand. There's a rematch, of course, but they've got 2 games with Dallas, who seems to be finished now. They got 2 games to go, and that last game of the season will be in Dallas. They've got Tennessee, who's bad. So there's some very winnable games down the stretch, and the outlook in mid-November this year is so much brighter than it was in recent years, and certainly under the Dan Snyder regime. Tony Dungy will be part of the pregame show tonight on NBC, and he hooked up with J.P. Finley of NBC yesterday, local NBC, and Dungy is among those who are singing the praises of Jayden Daniels.
There is no question about it. I've just been in awe, and Rodney Harrison and I sit there and we watch all the games on Sundays before our broadcast, and my mouth is just dropping. I know how difficult it is to come in and play quarterback at a high level your first year. We saw C.J. Stroud do it last year and play some amazing ball. And so people are kind of thinking, well, this is natural. This is normal. It's not normal. And Peyton Manning, my quarterback, who's a Hall of Famer and one of the best to ever do it, he was 3-13 with 28 interceptions his first year. That is more the norm.
Right.
But Jayden Daniels, I think the benefit that some of these guys have had, and we've talked about it on our show, Jayden, and it's just different when you transfer, you moved around, you played in a couple of different systems in college, and you started 50, 55 games. So you're not playing just on a 1-year basis, or you've had a few games in college. He is well-oiled, well-versed. He knows the game of football, and I think that's helped him. Bo Nix, same way at Denver, playing a couple different systems, playing big games, and you played a lot of football. You come in a little bit more ready for it than maybe the average rookie quarterback.
Sure. And Jayden's just so composed and keeps cool at all times. What does that do for a locker room? Locker rooms tend to look towards the quarterback for whether it's leadership or just command. And Jayden, even though he's a rookie, seems to have just that coolness and that poise.
I've thought that for years. People look at arm strength, and they look at height, and they look at a lot of things when they're evaluating quarterbacks. To me, I'd look for 2 things when I was looking at quarterbacks: accuracy and poise. If you've got that, you can be a winning quarterback in the NFL. And there's a lot of guys who have great arms, and maybe they've got 2 of the 3 things. But if you have accuracy and poise, that is what your locker room is looking for. And that's what Jayden has demonstrated to me in these early games.
Yeah, accuracy is such a big thing. It's so underrated, too, because people look at these big arms and they get mesmerized by them. And not that having a strong arm is a bad thing, and Jayden's got a strong arm, but the ability to put it in the right place and the poise, to throw it in the dirt when he needs to do that. Just so many things. It's unbelievable, really, that they have played 10 games and he's got 2 interceptions. That's here's Tony Dungy talking about Peyton Manning, one of the best to ever do it. 28 interceptions his rookie year. The numbers, and I know we're just talking about rookie quarterbacks here, but just how he has pretty much lapped the field. Not that Bo Nix has played poorly, but you're seeing the regression now in Caleb Williams. I'll get to that in a minute. But here's how he ranks among rookies in quarterbacking. 7 wins, that's the most. 2,147 passing yards, that's number 1. 9 passing touchdowns, that ties him for second. 464 rushing yards, and that's off only 5 last week. So that, I think, would be a little bit of a concern that maybe they figured some things out and how to bottle them up. But, I'm sure he's due for some big run games as well. 4 rushing touchdowns, that's first. 68.7 completion percentage, that's best among rookies. And a 101.7 passer rating. Across the board, just been phenomenal, which, brings us to the draft and, how they looked at it. And I've said this before. If Dan Snyder still owned the team and they had the number 2 pick and Caleb Williams, a local guy from Gonzaga, was there at number 1, he'd have traded 3 number 1s up to the Bears to get him. And Caleb Williams here would probably look even worse than he has so far with the Chicago Bears, especially in the last few weeks. And since the Hail Mary game here, the Bears have not scored a touchdown. They lost 19-3 last week to New England, and he was sacked 9 times. He's been sacked 38 times this season. I mean, that's getting into Sam Howell territory from last year. And this is the number one guy who's the Heisman Trophy winner. Come on. So we get to the draft, and I would think if the draft were held today that you'd see Jayden Daniels drafted number 1. But here's the amazing thing, and Mel Kiper and I talked about this right before the draft, that he said he got a call from Jayden Daniels' mother before last season, before he went into his last year at LSU, and wondering, would it make sense for him to come out for the draft? And Mel said, well, you're probably looking at 3rd or 4th round. It might make sense for him to go back. Well, obviously it did make sense for him to go back. He won the Heisman Trophy and was drafted number 2 overall. But this is Mel yesterday on our morning show on Sportsmanlike in how he looked at the 2 quarterbacks going into the draft.
I saw Caleb play high school football, and what he was doing then, he did it at the college level at various programs, and he's doing in the National Football League. He had a 3-4 game stretch this year where he looked like, boy, he's going to be great. So if you show him, Bill Walsh, when he talked to me, the late great Bill Walsh did back a long time ago during the expansion draft when Carolina and Jacksonville came in, he said if a player shows he's great, it's up to the coaching staff, the organization, to maintain that level of consistency. Once they show it, let's maintain it. If the kid's a hard worker and he's the first one in, last one out, let's maintain that. So that's up to the organization. Caleb showed that, and now it's up to the Bears organization to maintain that. But I think in terms of Jayden, Caleb had already been the elite guy. Jayden wasn't. Well, that first year at LSU, he was good, he wasn't great. Like Burrow, same thing, good, not great. What did Jayden need to do? Add a little weight, but he also needed to get those eyes up. When you're in the pocket and you're looking down, and then you're thinking, run, 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 you're not allowing any opportunity for any pass plays to evolve late in the process. That's what he developed in year 2 at LSU, which made him the number 2 pick in the draft, not a 4th, 5th round pick, which is what he would have been had he come out a year prior. So the best decision any quarterback in the history of this game ever made was Jayden deciding to go back to LSU and have that year, win the Heisman, the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award, and become the 2nd pick in the draft and be equipped to go into the NFL and play at this level. Had he come out a year earlier, history would have been rewritten.
Yeah, and how about the New England Patriots winning that 5th game? Because the tiebreaker would have gone to them. Washington beat New England last year. So, a lot of things had to line up properly. But and look, it's possible that Caleb Williams goes on to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. I think that's still very much in play. Rookie quarterbacks struggle. What's happening here is an anomaly. That doesn't happen. You heard what Tony Dungy said. It's so hard to do what Jayden Daniels is doing. So there is still time on that, but it's all this time that's invested in scouting quarterbacks. And I go back to what Louis Riddick said. Louis Riddick went to all the pro days. He said, I don't care. If I were the Chicago Bears, I would take Jayden Daniels number 1. Nobody listened to that. That wasn't the consensus opinion. Mel doesn't evaluate. Mel when he talks about his draft, he's getting information from people that he knows, scouts, insiders, and they tell him where it's going. So when he projected Caleb Williams to go number 1, he wasn't necessarily saying he was the best quarterback in his opinion. He was saying that's what the consensus is. That's where he's going to go. Meantime, and we don't usually have this situation. It's more like, when Andrew Luck was taking the Colts to the playoffs and RG3 was on his way to flaming out here. We had all that remorse of, oh, wow, they traded all those draft picks up to number 2, and clearly there was a huge difference between 1 and 2. Now it's kind of reversed on this. And here's the view from Chicago. There's a reporter for The Athletic named Kevin Fishbane. And Kevin Fishbane was on yesterday on the Rich Eisen show. And he talked about not just, what's going on in Chicago with all the turmoil. They have fired Shane Waldron, who is the offensive coordinator, and they are going with Thomas Brown. And, remorse there is about Cliff Kingsbury, who's doing great things with Jayden Daniels and had an interview last year with the Bears. And listen to why they chose not to take him. Here's Kevin Fishbane of The Athletic.
They blew it. Like, simple as that. They blew it. And I do think Kingsbury was, from what I've heard, was maybe more in play than maybe people thought at the time. But there was a key similarity in a lot of these people that he talked to. Matt Eberflus wanted somebody with the experience of being with the Sean McVays and the Kyle Shanahans. Like, that was a priority. That's my best kind of guess at why it was Waldron over Kingsbury. Now, obviously, there could be personality questions. There could be just little, micro things that happened in the interview that I'm not privy to. But just knowing what they were looking for and the type of offense they were looking for, they really gravitated to these guys who worked with McVay. And it's that old joke from a couple of years ago, like all you had to do is have a cup of coffee with Sean McVay and suddenly you could be a play caller one day. And Shane Waldron did a lot more than that. But there were other guys in that tree that they talked to, other guys who are running offenses who have done a lot better than what Waldron did in Chicago. But yeah, the Kingsbury thing, and you look at what's going on in Washington. I mean, Rich, these are two franchises, you know this so well, that have just been starving for a quarterback, have been starving for success. And for the Bears to see what's happening in Washington and the complete opposite is happening here makes that whole thing sting, and it allows them to be up for questions about why Kingsbury wasn't the guy.
And we are not usually on this side of the story, right? We're usually where the Chicago is on these kind of things. New ownership, new coaching staff, the whole thing has made a big difference. There's also this, and this is really where things ramp up. There are reports that some of the players have gone to the coaches and said, you need to bench this guy. We came into this season thinking we were going to be a playoff team. It doesn't look like we're going to do that with this guy. That is a remarkable part of the story, too. This is Fishbane with Rich Eisen yesterday on the thought that the number one pick of the draft could be benched.
Caleb Williams is very smart. And he's doing a lot of things at the line that other rookie quarterbacks don't do and can't do. And I feel like they gave him all that liberty to do it, and it was just too much. So you have that going on the Shane Waldron side. I do think you bring up a good point about Thomas Brown, because this is somebody who's got that kind of galvanizing personality, if you will. Like you hear this, I was reading an article the other day from his time in LA, Matthew Stafford, who played with Thomas Brown in Georgia, said when he comes in the room, he commands the room. And this team needs that right now. Like you already heard in week 3, they were telling Shane Waldron to coach them harder. So Waldron just wasn't maybe the right personality fit for this building. And the hope is that obviously you got to win games in the field, but this whole offense in the locker room needs somebody that they believe in, that they trust. And I think Thomas Brown at least is going to come in there with a different personality that I feel like they're going to gravitate to.
Kevin Fishbane of The Athletic here covering the Bears on the Rich Eisen Show. Sylvie, known as Mark Silverman, known as Sylvie of Waddle and Sylvie there in Chicago, a very popular radio show. I've appeared on it a couple times myself. Says that he was hearing some veterans were asking for Caleb to be benched in favor of Tyson Bagent. What's your reporting on that, Kevin?
Yeah, so I haven't heard that, Rich, but here's the thing. Like, there are some frustrated veterans in that locker room, and they're not really masking it. And these are guys, if you look at, again, I'm not saying that these are the people who, went to management with this. I'm not going to dispute Sylvie's report. But like Keenan Allen's here on 1 year. Mercedes Lewis came back for 1 year. DJ Moore just signed a long-term extension to be here, to be part of this. So you could understand that some of those guys are probably frustrated. You could understand that they see Caleb Williams struggling. And one of the things that Tyson Bagent does well is he's accurate. He gets the ball out quick, and he's very accurate. We saw that in his brief time last year. All that aside, Rich, it is a stupid idea to bench Caleb Williams and put in Tyson Bagent. It just that would be, I'm sure you guys have talked about what's going on in Indianapolis, different situations, but Caleb Williams needs confidence. He needs to get better. And he's not going to get better by sitting on the bench and watching Tyson Bagent, who, look, the Bears made a phenomenal find in Bagent. The fact that this conversation reportedly is even coming up speaks to Bagent's abilities, which is great. But Caleb Williams is the number one pick. He's a Heisman Trophy winner, right? Those 3 games, you were there, Rich, in London, that happened. It was you saw it. I was there in person. He made those plays. I just think that the goal for this team right now, and it's going to be hard for some guys, coaches and players, coaches who want to, make it to next year, players who want to win, it's going to be hard for them to have this perspective. But the ultimate goal for this franchise is to, in January, know that they have the guy, to know that no matter who the coach is next year, no matter who the coordinator is next year, they have their guy in Caleb Williams. And they felt like that when they drafted him. They felt like that coming out of London. I think that they still feel that, but the results aren't there. And benching him is not going to get you anywhere closer to that result at the end of the season.
That's Kevin Fishbane of The Athletic, covers the Bears for them. And he says, stupid idea to bench Caleb Williams, but it's in play. And if, in fact, this has gone on behind the scenes with players going to coaches and saying, got to bench this guy. Oy, 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 oy. Now, Matt Eberflus almost certainly is going to get fired at the end of the season. And I believe that Cliff Kingsbury is going to be the coach next year. I mean, that's a move they have to make. Kingsbury didn't coach Caleb Williams per se at USC, but he was an offensive advisor. They worked closely together. And what you heard Fishbane say about why they didn't hire him, because they were so intent of getting somebody off the Sean McVay tree. McVay was here. I mean, he's a good coach, but that is what qualifies you to become a head. I guess people buy into various mythology, and hiring off that tree was probably a good idea for some teams. It just also goes back to how incredibly stupid it was of Dan Snyder to get rid of the Shanahans. The Shanahans, their tree dominates the NFL now. You could have picked any one of those guys. Sean McVay. No, they had to go in another direction. Fortunately, things are on track now. I mean, it's just, it just also highlights when you look at the Bears that the calm that you have here now, the confidence that they got it right with the right general manager and Adam Peters, certainly the biggest hurdle, getting the right quarterback in Jayden Daniels, and at least for now, the right coach in Dan Quinn. I mean, it's just a harmony that we have not had here forever, since Joe Gibbs won, really. And that's gone back 30 years, almost 35 years. Crazy. So what makes these quarterbacks get it? The young ones get it. Kurt Warner knows something about it, an incredible story of how he got to the Hall of Fame after being an undrafted free agent who started exactly 1 year in college. We'll get to that as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
If you're just jumping in your car, I've been spending some time on the happy comparison, at least for now, between the two top quarterbacks taken, what's going on with Caleb Williams in Chicago. They've already fired the offensive coordinator. There's reports that players are going to the coaching staff and saying, you got to put this rookie on the bench, to Jayden Daniels, who will certainly be the rookie of the year. He's won, he played 10 games, so he's won 7 Rookie of the Week awards. I mean, it's just a tale of two different quarterbacks. It's probably going to even out to some degree over the years. You know, it's probably not going to be so stark as it is now. But there's another thing that you might compare this with what's going on in the NBA. Victor Wembanyama, who looks like in 2 or 3 years, if not sooner, could be the best player in the league. He's the unicorn. He's a 7-footer who handles the ball. He's like 7'4", shoots threes. And last night against the Wizards, he had a career-high 50 points. He became the 4th youngest player in NBA history to score 50 or more in a game. And not only that, even though he spent 32 and a half minutes on the floor, he did all the scoring in 26 minutes. So it's almost 2 points a minute. Threes help with that. And let me see how many threes he shot last night. Wembanyama on three-point field goals was 8 of 16. Wow, 50%. And the Wizards have their own 7-foot Frenchman who was taken number 2 overall. His name is Alex Sarr. And his shooting percentage last night wasn't horrific. He was 6 for 14, but he was 0 for 5 from 3. And they want him to keep shooting threes. He's shooting 18% on the year from three-point range. And, you know, if the ping-pong balls fall a little bit differently, Victor Wembanyama is playing in Washington, and the outlook for the franchise is a whole lot different. Instead, it's Alex Sarr, who, as the number 2 overall, may become a great player, and with some other players around him as they continue to tank and hopefully, you know, build up through the draft, you know, that's what you got. But that's a stark contrast that you saw on the floor last night. That's like, oh, wow. that is like, you know, bust city so far. Way too early to call Alex Sarr a bust. But as a three-point shooter, he's a mess right now. And as a three-point shooter, Victor Wembanyama is terrific, and he's 7'4", and nobody's ever going to block his shot. All right, back to the quarterback development thing. And Kurt Warner, you know his story. They made a movie about it. He played 4 years at Northern Illinois, sat the bench. Actually 5 years with the redshirt year. So he sat the bench for 4 years, became a starter in his senior year, went undrafted, went to the Green Bay Packers, who had a slew of quarterbacks in there, including Brett Favre in his prime. He was released, bounced around the Arena League, did really well in the Arena League, though. Really flourished there. Got another shot with the Rams, spent a year as a backup, and then Trent Green got hurt just as the 99 season was set to begin. Got hurt in the preseason, tore his ACL. Warner steps in. The greatest show on turf is formed. He wins the Super Bowl, goes to another one, gets the Cardinals to a Super Bowl. They never get to a Super Bowl, and now he's in the Hall of Fame and knows a thing or two about quarterbacking. And he was on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, and he was asked, well, you know, how do you know when a guy has got it? You know, like clearly Jayden Daniels has it. You know, where does that happen? And this was how Warner explained it.
Even though I sat on the bench for 4 years in college and played in arena football and what have you, I had the skill set in terms of understanding how to play the position the way it was asked to play it in the NFL, the understanding of how to read defenses, see things, process information. So yeah, sitting could be beneficial without a doubt. But to me, it's so much about, do you have the skill set where playing, you'll learn and grow through playing, but you've got enough of a skill set to be successful. And, you know, I was talking a little bit about Anthony Richardson yesterday. And then you liken that to guys like Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, who were guys that were cerebral, guys that had the tools to be successful. Now, Peyton threw a bunch of interceptions his first year, had to go through some growing pains, but he had the skill set to be able to survive and play and do some good things through that. Andrew Luck the same way, but I think there's a lot of young quarterbacks that are taught differently in college football, that it becomes more about plug and play guys, athletic guys. Hey, use your athleticism more than learning the position. And, you know, when you get to the NFL, it's hard to live in that world. Even if you're a great athlete, it's hard to live in the athletic world, and you've got to do those other things. And if you don't have that skill set, this game can swallow you up very quickly.
Yeah, and maybe you can speak to this, because I talk about this a lot, that the game is so fast in the NFL, you have to throw guys open. In college, guys are open. I mean, if you play at a big-time program, you're going to have multiple receivers to throw to. But explain to us, the audience, what it's like when there is a small window, when you have to have anticipation, where when it's not there, you have to eat it. Like, you can't scramble around. And these are things that these college quarterbacks come in, hey, I can extend a play. I'm the next Patrick Mahomes. No, you're not. But that ability to fit a ball in a tight window, explain that.
Yeah, it's a great point. I was interviewing Bryce Young last week and asked him what the biggest challenge was in the NFL. And he said the biggest challenge is how consistently good the players are on every play. Whereas in Alabama, what you might call Alabama Open versus NFL Open is that, you're going to have all this space between a receiver and a defender where if you're a little bit late with the football or if the football's not perfect, there's that ability to adjust and still have a completion. In the NFL, if you're a little bit late, if you're a little bit behind, that's an incompletion. That could be an interception. That could be the difference between winning and losing a football game. So you're so right, Ian. Some of it is the key of reading body language, right? So a guy's not even open yet, but if I can read the body language of the defender knowing, oh, his hips are turned this way, I can let that ball go because he can't make up for that. If I've got to wait and see my guy open, now that guy has the ability to correct and make up for that ground that he didn't have before. So the ability to anticipate, see the big picture, know exactly what I'm looking at. And then the other part, Dan, that I think is lost on a lot of these young guys is the physical technique to be ready to throw and able to throw quickly. A lot of these guys are back there bouncing or their feet aren't set. And all of a sudden the play says throw it. And now they've got to drop, get set and throw it. And it's like, sorry, too late. So being able to clean up your technique is such a big part of this as well. So when you see it, the ball can actually come out right away. And again, you're playing ahead of the game or you're playing the game faster, which allows you the benefit of being more successful in a lot of situations.
Okay, but how do you explain Jayden Daniels? How do you explain C.J. Stroud? I mean, even Drake May has played pretty well.
Agreed. I think the first thing I'll say, I'll go right back to technique. You look at C.J. Stroud, you look at Jayden Daniels, those guys have strong technique. So they're ready to play quarterback. They're ready to throw the football.
Wait, but what are they doing that Caleb Williams is not doing?
Well, I mean, again, this would be a long conversation, Dan, just in terms of the ability to be prepared. So they're loaded into their legs. They're set. Their balance and their base is always there. So they're playing heavy into the ground as opposed to playing high, playing on their toes, playing in a position where they have to drop and move. The more movement we make between set or time that we make the decision and set to throw, the more chance we have to miss. The less movement we have, the more efficient we're going to be. So those are two guys that have come into the league very technically sound. So they don't have a lot of that wasted movement. They're always ready to play and throw, which gives them the advantage. And then there's the other side that some of these guys have learned how to play the game the right way earlier on. And so I've always made this contention. It's really hard to learn how to play quarterback. And I say that simply more in the pocket quarterback, reading, timing, anticipation, where my eyes need to be on a particular concept. It's way harder to learn that when you're playing against the best players in the world and you're playing on a Sunday afternoon than learning it when you're young and being able to hone those skills. And so some of these guys have been taught that, have played in systems that have required that more than other guys. And we're expecting those other guys to be able to play at the same level as quickly, and it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and they're so quick to move on from these guys. I mean, if Peyton Manning comes along now, well, one thing would hinder him too. He couldn't run. You can't play quarterback now if you can't move. And he really, he was great at other things. But would they stomach the 28 interceptions? Would that happen? I don't know. I mean, you got to move on quickly. Now, he was the number one pick. And he came from, great bloodlines. His father was not a Hall of Fame quarterback, but an excellent quarterback for a long time in the NFL. Maybe they would stick it out. But the impatience now leads to all that. And what Warner is saying is there's so much you have to learn. And that's been the great thing about Daniels, not just the physical ability, but his insatiable thirst for watching tape. Who gets in? He's 23 years old. 23-year-old guys don't get up at that early in the morning to watch tape. He does, and that's made a big difference. On the other side, you have the disaster that is Aaron Rodgers with the New York Jets. They're 3-7 on the year. It's a season that's not going anywhere. He's going to turn 41 in a couple of weeks. And he was asked yesterday if he wants to play next year. And he said, I think so, yeah. Well, do they want him back? He has a year left on his contract. It includes $2.5 million in non-guaranteed base salary with $21 million in bonuses. He would count $23.5 million against the cap. But if the Jets cut him before June 1st, they would get hit with a $49 million dead money charge, and it would be $14 million after June 1st. So obviously, if they're going to release him, they would do it after June 1st. Will they? I don't know. Will they bring him back for another year? It's hard to imagine. I mean, it looks like he is done, and you would think that Warner might even say, well, I'm not so sure. Now, he agreed with Dan Patrick that, in fact, Aaron Rodgers is finished.
I think it's just the comfort of playing the position, because I watch the ball come out of his hands and I say, he can still throw it well enough and as well as anybody in terms of throwing it. But I think it's the comfort of, him being out a year, him being a little bit older, the expectations where he just doesn't look comfortable playing the position anymore. He's moving too fast. His mind seems to be moving fast because his feet are moving fast. He's out of that comfort zone. Whereas when you watched him, in so many years, it was like he was poised. He was never panicking. He never looked like he was playing too fast. And I think that's what happens when we feel like we're losing something. I don't know what that is, whether it's control, whether it's the physical part of things, is that it's easy to start going, oh my gosh, I can't do everything that I did before. And the game starts moving faster for us than it did early in our career. And I think that's how that's what you have to avoid. And for me, it was the mental side of it. I felt like mentally I was sharper than I'd ever been, so I could see and process and think fast. So it didn't cause me to panic because maybe some of the other things had dwindled a little bit.
That's Kurt Warner, played a long time in the league. Actually, he had a couple of bad concussions at the end in his last year in Arizona, and that probably speeded up his retirement. What a remarkable story he is. And the thing he said at the end about, how mentally he could see the game, I remember having this conversation with Phil Simms probably 30 years ago. And Simms, he had gotten hurt. I remember in the year that they won the second Super Bowl, and he came back and he actually won the job again. And then after the 93 season, he decided to retire. Now, there was when Bill Belichick took over as the Cleveland Browns coach in 94, he wanted to bring him back. He was through with Bernie Kosar, and he wanted Simms. And Simms thought about making a comeback, but he didn't do it. But what he said is exactly what Warner said. He said it's a cruel game. Because just when you really, really get a handle on the mental part of the game, understanding concepts and things like that, you master it, your body lets you down. The physical part lets you down. This is why Tom Brady is so remarkable. And really, that's led us to the Aaron Rodgers mess, because the Jets banked on the fact that Aaron Rodgers could still be effective into his 40s, and he's not. And he's sucked the air out of the room, too, and he's a narcissist, and he's created a lot of problems. Brady had the mental part down, and he had that for a long time, but he went to great lengths to keep his body in that kind of shape. And he had his own personal trainer, and the avocado ice cream and the diet, and all those things worked. And so he was able to play that long. Didn't work that way with Aaron Rodgers, and the Jets are paying the price for it. They gambled, and they lost on that. All right, tonight, yeah, I mean, it's going to be on tomorrow if they can beat the Philadelphia Eagles tonight. I'm in a feeling of a big game like this in a long, long time. But this is earlier than we expected. It arrived maybe a year or two early, but you'll take it, right? You'll take it tonight. 8:15 kickoff, Eagles and the Commanders in Philadelphia. And if you don't have Prime, you can watch it on Channel 5. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.